On the evening of December 21, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 was making a routine transatlantic journey during the busy holiday season. The route began in Frankfurt, continued through London Heathrow, and was scheduled to cross the Atlantic toward New York City before ending in Detroit. The aircraft was a Boeing 747 named Clipper made of the seas, a symbol of long-distance air travel at a time when international flying still carried a certain prestige. Many passengers were heading home for Christmas. Some were students returning to the United States after a semester abroad. Others were business travelers, families, and crew members doing what they had done many times before, boarding a familiar aircraft on a familiar route. But shortly after 7 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, while the plane was above southern Scotland, the flight disappeared from radar. What happened next would turn a small town's name into a symbol of mass murder, grief, and one of the most complex terrorism investigations in modern history. The aircraft was destroyed by a bomb while flying over Lockerbie, a town in Scotland near the English border. The explosion tore through the Boeing 747 in midair, causing the aircraft to break apart. All 243 passengers and 16 crew members on board were killed. But the catastrophe did not end in the sky. Large sections of wreckage fell onto Lockerbie itself, crashing into residential streets and homes. 11 people on the ground died when parts of the plane struck the town. In total, 270 people were killed. The Lockerbie bombing became the deadliest terrorist attack in the history of the United Kingdom, and one of the deadliest ever carried out in Europe. The scale of destruction was both international and intensely local. Families across countries lost loved ones, while residents of Lockerbie saw their own streets transformed into a disaster zone within seconds. In the immediate aftermath, responders faced a scene of extraordinary difficulty. Wreckage, luggage, documents, and personal belongings were scattered across a wide area. Investigators had to treat the landscape like a vast crime scene, while also dealing with the human reality of mass casualty recovery. For Lockerbie's residents, the event was not an abstract act of geopolitical violence. It happened in gardens, roads, houses, and fields. The town became both a witness and a victim. The investigation required identifying victims, reconstructing pieces of the aircraft, tracing luggage and cargo movements, and determining exactly where the explosion began. Unlike an accident caused by mechanical failure, this was a deliberate attack, and every fragment could matter. The central questions were simple to ask but extremely hard to answer. Who built the bomb? How did it get onto the aircraft? Who helped, and who ordered it? The investigation became a major international effort. It was led by Dumfries and Galloway Constabulary, with support from Strathclyde Police, the London Metropolitan Police, and the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation. That partnership reflected the nature of the crime. The attack happened over Scotland, the aircraft was American, the passengers came from multiple countries, and the flight had moved through several airports. Investigators examined baggage records, airport security procedures, forensic debris, and intelligence leads. The inquiry lasted years and involved thousands of pieces of evidence. The working theory that emerged from the United States and United Kingdom governments focused on a bomb concealed in luggage and routed through the international air system. The case would eventually point toward Libya, then ruled by Muammar Gaddafi, a leader already locked in years of confrontation with Western governments. In 1991, nearly 3 years after the bombing, arrest warrants were issued for 2 Libyan intelligence officers, Abdelbaset al-Megrahi and Lamin Khalifa Fhimah. Both were linked to Libya's Mukhabarat el-Jamahiriya, the state security and intelligence apparatus. Their alleged role placed the case at the intersection of criminal law and international diplomacy. The suspects were not immediately handed over. Libya resisted extradition, and the standoff became a major international issue. The United Nations imposed sanctions intended to pressure Gaddafi's government to cooperate. For the families of the victims, this meant that the legal process moved painfully slowly. The bombing had taken seconds, but accountability was unfolding over years. The case also raised a difficult question: When a crime is suspected to involve agents of a state, is it prosecuted as individual murder, state terrorism, or both? After repeated negotiations and years of sanctions, a compromise was reached. In 1999, Muammar Gaddafi allowed the two accused men to be transferred for trial at Camp Zeist in the Netherlands. The location was unusual. A former American airbase was temporarily placed under Scottish legal authority so that the trial could proceed under Scots law while avoiding a trial physically held in the United Kingdom or the United States. This arrangement reflected how politically sensitive the case had become. It was not just about proving guilt in a courtroom, it was about finding a legal framework that Libya, Britain, the United States, and international institutions could all tolerate. For many victims' relatives, the opening of the trial was a breakthrough, but also the beginning of another difficult stage, hearing evidence, watching legal arguments, and hoping that the full truth would finally emerge. In 2001, the verdicts were delivered. Abdelbaset al-Megrahi was found guilty of 270 counts of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. Luman Khalifa Fhimah, his co-accused, was acquitted. Megrahi became the only person ever convicted for the Lockerbie bombing. The court's decision gave the case a legal conclusion, but not a complete historical one. A bombing of this complexity likely required more than one operative, and many suspected accomplices were never identified, charged, or convicted. That gap has remained one of the most painful parts of the story. A conviction can establish responsibility under the law, but families and investigators often seek something broader, a full account of the network, the planning, the chain of command, and the motive. In Lockerbie, the legal record answered some questions while leaving many others unresolved. Libya's broader responsibility became a central issue in the years after the trial. In 2003, Gaddafi's government agreed to pay more than $2 billion in compensation to the families of victims. Libya also accepted responsibility in a form connected to United Nations requirements for sanctions to be lifted, including the fact that Megrahi had been a government employee. But Gaddafi maintained that he had not personally ordered the attack. This distinction mattered diplomatically. It allowed Libya to move toward reintegration with the international community while avoiding a full personal confession from its leader. To some observers, compensation was a sign of accountability. To others, it was a political transaction that still did not reveal who gave the ultimate order. The money could never restore the dead, and it did not end the demand for a more complete truth. In 2009, the case took another controversial turn when Megrahi was released from a Scottish prison on compassionate grounds after being diagnosed with prostate cancer. Scottish authorities allowed him to return to Libya, where he received a public welcome that angered many relatives of victims and political leaders in the United States. Supporters of the release argued that compassionate release was part of Scottish legal tradition and should apply even in the most serious cases. Critics argued that the scale of the crime made release morally unacceptable, especially while many families believed the full truth had not been disclosed. Megrahi died in 2012. His death closed the life of the only convicted bomber, but it did not close the case. For many, it deepened the sense that justice had been partial, delayed, and incomplete. The Lockerbie bombing has also remained surrounded by dispute and alternative theories. Because so few people were convicted, and because the operation seemed to require several accomplices, unresolved gaps encouraged suspicion. Some theories suggested involvement by actors beyond Libya, including claims about East German Stasi agents or other intelligence services. Some victims' relatives, including the well-known Lockerbie campaigner Jim Swire, have challenged parts of the official theory. One major dispute concerns how the bomb entered the air system. The official United States and United Kingdom position linked the bomb to feeder flights, including a route from Malta. Critics have argued that the device may instead have been introduced at Heathrow Airport. These claims remain controversial, but they show why the case has never settled fully in public memory. The official verdict exists alongside persistent doubts. In 2011, during the first Libyan civil war, a new claim added another layer to the story. Mustafa Abdul Jalil, Libya's former Minister of Justice, said that Gaddafi had personally ordered the bombing. By then, Libya was in turmoil, Gaddafi's regime was collapsing, and former insiders were speaking in a radically changed political environment. The claim was significant because it addressed one of the central unresolved questions: whether the attack was merely carried out by Libyan agents or directly ordered from the top. But like many claims emerging during revolutionary upheaval, it also required careful treatment. Statements made after a regime falls can be revealing, but they do not automatically settle legal proof. Still, the allegation reinforced what many had long suspected, that the bombing was not simply the work of isolated operatives, but part of state-directed violence. Decades after the bombing, the legal story is still not over. In 2020, United States authorities indicted Abu Aguila Massoud, a Libyan national and Tunisian resident, accusing him of participating in the attack. He was 37 years old at the time of the bombing. In 2022, Massoud was taken into custody, and in 2023 he pleaded not guilty. A federal trial is scheduled for 2026. The case against him represents the continuing effort to identify people beyond al-Megrahi who may have helped make the attack possible. It also shows how terrorism investigations can stretch across generations. Evidence may be revisited, governments may change, suspects may become reachable, and new prosecutions may emerge long after the world assumes a case has gone cold. For the families, each development reopens pain but also offers the possibility of answers. Pan Am Flight 103 remains one of the defining aviation terror attacks of the modern era. It followed earlier bombings involving Boeing 747 aircraft, including Air India Flight 182 in 1985, another mass casualty mid-air bombing, and the destruction of Pan Am Flight 93 on the ground in 1970 during the Dawson's Field hijackings. But Lockerbie stands apart because of the combination of scale, location, legal complexity, and lasting controversy. It was an attack on an aircraft, but also on a town. It produced one conviction, compensation, sanctions, diplomatic deals, disputed theories, and new prosecutions decades later. Above all, it left 270 people dead and thousands more living with the consequences. The story of Pan Am Flight 103 is not only about how a bomb destroyed a plane. It is about how difficult it can be to turn tragedy into truth, and truth into justice. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.